There's a couple new Surfaces in town, and you probably can't have them. It's new Surface Day. It's always a big day on this podcast channel when Microsoft announces new Surface hardware. It's always a big day because, well, they don't announce a ton of it, right? They're pretty methodical about how they roll this stuff out. And today they are announcing this guy, or these guys, or gals, or whatever you're going to call them, behind me. And you might be thinking, Brad, that's the Surface Pro 8, isn't it? And you would be wrong, because Microsoft is calling this thing the Surface Pro 7 Plus. And it's not coming to consumer channels, so if you're thinking about walking down to Best Buy to grab a Surface Pro 7 Plus, you're going to be disappointed. This is only coming to the business market, the IT pro community, the enterprise operations. And so let's just dive into what is new with the Surface Pro 7 Plus, because there are a couple notable but very minor updates. First of all, as the name suggests, Surface Pro 7 Plus, not a complete redesign, not a complete overhaul, just an update to a previous version, the Surface Pro 7. And it's going to now include the Intel 11th gen processors, which Microsoft claims, and I'm assuming they're getting this from potentially Intel or whatever, that this is up to 2.1 times faster than before. You can now also spec it out with 32 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. And the other big deal is that this is going to ship on day one with LTE Advanced. Now, you might be wondering, Brad, when is day one for this hardware? Well, actually starting next week. Microsoft is pushing this pretty quickly out the door, and you're going to need to call up your business sales channel marketer friend or whoever you call if you want to order these things, because these again are not consumer focused. This is only business or enterprise. And so that's the big deal here. And the also other things that Microsoft is including in this is fast charging is included. So you get up to 80% in just over an hour. And Microsoft is saying up to 15 hours of battery life, but put a big caveat on that, folks, because I've done enough Surface device reviews that typically I would peg this thing probably somewhere between 7 to 8 hours during normal use and operation. Typically, Microsoft does this fancy custom battery test. Sometimes it's just video playback, and it always skews up more than it actually is when you're actually working, at least in my opinion. We'll have to wait and see once we get our actual hands on these devices. But the big thing that is actually changing with this iteration of the Surface Pro 7 Plus is that the removable hard drive feature that first debuted on the Surface Pro X is coming to the Surface Pro 7 Plus, which means that, hey, when you need to dispose of these things, you can just pop a little door off, unscrew the drive, smash it with your favorite hammer, and then dispose of it properly and securely. This is a big deal for corporations who really need data security, or the government type contractors or vendors, those types of iterations, or folks, I should say. This is a very big deal. And Microsoft actually said that when they were launching this thing, this is one of the reasons why they shoved this out the door so quickly. I very candidly asked Microsoft why they didn't offer a consumer version, and they said the best way and the fastest way to get this to corporate customers was to do it in this fashion. Now, they're not committing to a Surface Pro 7 Plus coming to the consumer line. I have no additional information on that at this time. This is purely for business customers, so just keep that in mind as you think about this product. Availability is going to be starting next week. You'll be able to order it available worldwide, at least wherever Surface is most likely sold. Although for your specific region, you're going to have to you're going to have to phone a friend. If you're in the US, I can tell you that definitely is happening next week. And so those are the big updates, right? You got the removable hard drive, you've got LTE Advanced day one, Intel 11th gen, and then you can really max out RAM and storage at 32 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. And that's it. Like, no form factor changing, no display changing, still the same webcam, still the same speakers, and most importantly, still the same Surface Connect, because Microsoft makes the pitch, and I tend to believe this, that for the corporate customers who have bought thousands of these things over the years, they don't want a different connector. They want to be able to just slap it in the exact same way, use the same peripherals and dongles and everything else, and just pull out the hardware and give them new hardware when needed. And they have to do that with the Surface Connect port. That is by far the easiest way. I do expect at some point they might transition away from that, but I don't have any additional information or know when that might be. But at least for this iteration, you're getting Surface Connect, one USB-A and one USB-C, and so if it looks like the Surface Pro 7 and acts like the Surface Pro 7, that's because it's called the Surface Pro 7 Plus, and unless you look on the inside of the device or the back where you can swap out the hard drive, you're not going to notice any differences. Now, this brings up another just big question, which I started to talk about. If they're not shipping this in the consumer line, is this like a divergence of the brand? interesting question. Now, this isn't technically the first time that Microsoft has created two different products for consumer and enterprise. If you think back to the Surface Laptop 3, AMD had an offering for the consumer channel, but enterprise was all Intel all the way through. And so technically that is a different SKU or different product. Now, the difference here is that it's not like you can go get the Surface Pro 7 Plus with a different CPU. Like, it's just not even offered at all. And so if you remember when the Surface Pro was launched, it was really launched at the consumer. And this is a big deal because it's not just a new product, right? But this is also sort of a new mindset for Microsoft, that they're not afraid to go to their corporate customers and be like, look, this is only available to you, and here you go. Now, the other interesting aside from this is maybe it's the Surface Pro sells better in the enterprise, which honestly would not surprise me in the slightest. I mean, typically when people ask me anymore what Surface they should go buy, it's either a Surface Book or a Surface Laptop. Surface Pro is fine. It's not a bad product, but at the same time, I think for the casual user, a Surface Laptop is just a better device for generally speaking. Now, we do see a lot of Surface Pro in the corporate world, and I suspect that Microsoft looked at this and said, look, if we're going to shove this thing out the door, our enterprise customers are buying just tons of new hardware lately. We saw that in Surface sales in the last quarter, and so it makes sense to get this thing into that avenue first. Also, they very likely see like the proof is in the pudding when it comes to selling to consumers. Consumers love new form factors, and if they sell the exact same thing and put their money into getting it into the the same marketing channels, it's the sales just aren't maybe going to do as well as, say, a complete redesign. So I'm still hoping that we will see a Surface Pro redesign, but I don't honestly know when that is going to be coming, and I honestly wouldn't be holding out for it at this time. So the other Surface product that has been announced is the Surface Hub 2S. Now, this is a very expensive piece of hardware. The Surface Hub 2S 55-inch has sold really well from what I have heard, and it's really liked in the IT community because it's effectively just a giant Windows PC you can put in your corporate boardrooms, and it operates and functions just like a Windows device, and it's really super easy to manage, but then you get all the great Teams functionality and everything else. And so the 85-inch, I would imagine, is going to do just the same. Now, they are not cheap. The 55-inch starts somewhere around $9,000, and the 85-inch, I believe, is over $20,000. And that's like before you add any accessories, customization, service, or support, or anything else like that. So these are not devices that you are typically going to put in your house. But Microsoft, if you want to send me a 55-inch, I will happily put it right here, happily. That being said, the 85-inch is now available, and it's going to start shipping here in the near future. And so there you go. Two pretty big announcements, right? The 85-inch is quite literally big in just size. We knew this was coming. But then the Surface Pro 7 Plus. It is going to, by the way, kind of come in platinum and matte black, which you can see back here. It depends on the SKU and everything else. Starts at $899 to get into that hardware. And so depending on your specs and your configuration and everything else, the pricing will change accordingly. And of course, all your accessories are backwards and forwards compatible. So I'd be curious to know how you guys feel about the divergence of Microsoft taking the Surface Pro line and moving it to being, potentially having exclusive offerings for different channels. I don't know if this is really going to make anyone angry, because at the end of the day, I don't think it will, but I'd be curious to see if you guys think this is a bigger sort of, casting a shadow over the Surface brand about the future, about how Microsoft is going to position products or launch products or anything else like that. That being said, Surface brand has had some really good quarters. Microsoft clearly knows where the demand is for certain SKUs and specific products, and they very clearly told me that this is an in-demand feature, especially that removable hard drive, so people can smash them with a hammer or just replace them if they go bad, several years down the line. So there you go, guys. Surface Pro 7 Plus available starting next week. Surface Hub 2S 85-inch also becoming available, and those are the two Surface products that you probably can't have.